What's up everyone, my name is Caleb Brunco, and today I thought it might be a pretty fun video if I showed you my vintage lens collection. Little bit of a disclaimer before we start this video. This is in no way me trying to show off what I have or make anyone feel bad. I purchased all of these with my own money, and most of them I found at antique stores for dirt cheap, if not like nothing at all. So let's get into it. So why don't we start this off by talking about some of the lenses that have been gaining an insane amount of traction in the past few years, the vintage Russian lenses. On this black Zenit ET, we have a Helios 44-2, which pretty much everybody knows about at this point. You get that nice swirly bokeh, and you can pick these lenses up for insanely cheap, like 60 bucks. Along with that, I have another Helios 44-2. This one I found at an antique store, so here it is. And then we have a Helios 44M, which is a little bit of a later one compared to the 44-2. One of the ones that I think is super cool is this original Helios 44. So it's the original Helios 44 with the M39 mount. So kind of tricky to adapt to cameras compared to the M42 mounts on the other ones. But this one's kind of cool. It's completely silver, and I believe this one is from 1963. And this one is best known for having 13 aperture blades, so you get crazy smooth bokeh at any f-stop. Moving on, we have another Helios 44. This is a 44-M, but it's kind of special. It's been converted to an EF mount, and it has a anamorphic mod inside the lens, so it gives you these awesome flares and these oval bokeh. I did an entire video about it. I'll link it. I think it's on that side. So go check that out if you want to see more about this modded Helios. And then this is a Mir 1B. And fun fact, it's actually the first vintage lens that I ever bought. I think I bought it about 2.5 years ago. And then here we have a Jupiter 9. This is an 85mm f2. And it has like 15 aperture blades. This thing is nuts. Finally, from the Russian lenses that I have, you all know it. It's this giant monstrosity, which is the MTO 1000A, which is an 1100mm f10.5. If you haven't seen the video that I've done with this, go check it out, because it's insane to see just how crazy 1100mm is. The next set of lenses that we're talking about today are some of Mark Holtz's favorites, and honestly, I probably wouldn't have known about them unless I started watching his videos a few years ago. And those are the Pentax Takumars. I absolutely love these lenses. They have such a cool look. They are built like tanks, and they are really affordable compared to other vintage lenses at this point in time. Starting off with the widest, we have the 24mm f3.5. Unfortunately, Pentax Takumars weren't really known for making any fast wide angle lenses apart from the later 14mm 2.8, but that one's like insanely rare and like $2,000, so I don't have that one obviously. But we have the 24 3.5. I really wish they would have made something a little bit wider, like maybe even an 18 f4 or something, but I guess we'll stick to the 24. Next up, we have the 28mm 3.5, which I probably wouldn't have bought since I already had the 24, but I found one for like $5 or $10, so I just kind of had to snag it while it was there. Moving on, we have one of my personal favorites, which is the 35mm f2. This lens looks so good and is absolutely a must-have if you're building a Takumar set. Moving up the scale, we have the SMC Takumar 50mm f1.4. I did an entire video about this. I'll link it up above, and I still believe this is the best lens that you can get for under $100. Then we have the Super Takumar 85mm f1.9, which is amazing because it's 85mm, and who doesn't love a good 85? Then we have the 105mm f2.8. I don't really use this one too much, but when I bought a couple of the other ones, they just tossed this one in, so not gonna say no. Another of my personal favorites is the 135 f2.5. This is, I believe, the 5-element version, so it's not the more desirable 6-element version, but I found this thing for like $10, $15, so not complaining. Finally, from this set, we have the 200mm f4, which Pretty cool. Don't really use 200 millimeters that often for video work, but it's here if you need it. Moving on, we have probably what I would consider one of the best bang for buck kits of vintage lenses that I've ever found. And I believe Caleb Pike did an entire video building them into a cinema set for under $300 with the lenses included. So they're crazy cheap. And those lenses are the Auto Chinon series of lenses. Here we have the 28mm f2.8. We have the 35mm f2.8. We have the 55mm f1.7. And we have the 135mm f2.8. And you can get all four of these lenses, at least I found them, for $40. So essentially for $10 per lens, you can have an entire set for like $40, which is nuts. If you want to see a little more in depth on these lenses, go check out Caleb Pike's video. I will link it up above and down below in the comments. Before we move on, let me know down in the comments what your favorite vintage lens set is, or which ones you are currently using. I would love to hear that, and maybe I might find out some new ones that I didn't even know existed. The next set of lenses that I have, I found at an antique store, and it's a pretty complete set, but it's not like completely complete. And I really want to finish this set at some point, but they just keep going up in value and I just can't seem to stomach it. So unless I find them at an antique store, it'll probably never get finished. But those are the Olympus OM lenses. Attached to this OM1, we have a 28mm f3.5. We have one of my personal favorites, which is the 55mm f1.2. Love this thing. The 85mm f2, which is also just awesome. And the 135mm f3.5. If I was going to round this set out and complete this kit, I probably would go for a 24mm f2, a 35mm f2, and I would get a 135mm f2.8. And I think that would be like a perfect Olympus kit, but they're just creeping up a little too high in value right now. There's other things that I gotta work towards, so that's gotta go on the back burner, and they're probably gonna get too expensive to even finish it, but at least we got these ones, right? Up next is a set of lenses that I purchased earlier this year. I actually sought these ones out. Most of these did not come from antique stores. I went out of my way to find these because I want to convert them into cinema lenses and use them for my video work. And those are the Canon FD series. These lenses have been gaining a ton of popularity over the past year and a half or so, and I really wanted to just hop on them and get them before they got just too out of reach for me personally. So here they are. Starting out, we have the 17mm f4, and most of you might be saying, why didn't you go for the 14 2.8 or the 20mm 2.8? And that is because the 14mm 2.8 is like $9,000, so that's just not even in the same ballpark right now. And the 20mm is just too close to 24. So 17 is a nice little middle ground. So that's why I went for the 17. Next up is the 24mm f2.8 SSC. I really wanted the 24mm 1.4L, but they're just nuts. They were like $2,600 when I was looking at them like last year. And then now they jumped up to like $6,000. So that's just way out of the budget. And then they also have a 24mm f2, which I really wanted as well. But even those are up to like $1,000 now. And I can't see myself paying $1,000 for a 24mm f2. So we're sticking with the 24mm f2.8 because this was only like $150. Another reason why I don't have the 24mm f2 is because I have this 28mm f2, which I figured would fit that gap pretty well instead of having the 24 f2. And this one actually got this for a steal. This one was attached to a Canon AE1 that I bought for like $40. So got a nice little find with this one. One of my favorites from this set is the Canon 35mm f2 SSC, and this is the concave version, not the convex version, which you can tell by if the serial number is under 100,000, it is a concave version, which people say have much better optical qualities, and it fits better with the set. Next, we have the 55mm f1.2 SSC. And if you're looking for one of the best 1.2 lenses that you'll ever find for about $400, it's this all day long. This thing is insanely good for the price that it comes at. It looks super close to the 55mm aspherical for a fraction of the price. Moving up, we have one of my personal favorites. I did a video with this lens, and it is the 85mm f1.2L. I love this lens. I absolutely splurged getting this lens, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad I bought it when I did, because they have gone up a ton in value. So just very happy to have this one here. Rounding out the last of the prime set, we have the 135mm f2.5. This is the SC version, because in the SSC version, they did not make a 2.5, and I really, really wanted that extra little bit of light, because it gives a nice little kind of glow to the image. They also have a 135 f2, but I don't really feel like shelling out $1,600 for a lens that I'm not really gonna use that often, because I don't really use 135mm often enough to spend more than $100 on a lens. Another fun one that we have is a 35 to 105 f3.5. This one's kind of cool. It came with another AE1 that I found. Everything works perfectly on it, and it even has a little macro switch. So this one's really fun to shoot film with, but I don't see myself using it too much for video work. And while it is not part of the FD set, one of my absolute favorite lenses that I have is this Canon FL 58mm f1.2. If you haven't seen my video about this lens, go check it out. I will link it up top here. I'll link it down in the comments. This lens is the best 1.2 lens I've ever found, and it's like $200. Not best optically, because this thing flares and glows like crazy. But if you want a super fun stylized look that you should have when you're shooting with vintage lenses, this is one of the ultimate ones right here. So check it out. My last set of vintage lenses that I want to talk about today are my absolute babies. These are my pride and joys, and I am so happy with them. They are the Contax Zeiss set of lenses. These are the absolute like Rolls Royce of vintage lenses. And yes, I know Leica Rs exist. Yeah, whatever. Personally, I think the Contax Zeiss are better. They go more with my style of work, but absolutely love the Leica Rs too. I just went with Contax Zeiss, so deal with it. All of the lenses in this set are the AE models, so they're the slightly earlier ones, and I just kind of like the look of them a little more. All of them, except for one in this set, are made in West Germany, so I just wanted to keep the set as consistent as possible across the board. Starting out with the widest of the set, we have the 18mm f4. I would have loved more than anything to have a 15mm f3.5, but I got into these lenses a little bit too late, so that thing shot up in value, and it's just not attainable for me personally right now. So had to go with the 18mm. Thankfully, I don't shoot crazy wide that often anyway, so this should get the job done. Here we have the 25mm f2.8. I would have loved to have a 21mm 2.8 or a 28mm f2, but they're just too expensive. They're just completely out of the budget for now. So I think I'll just stick with the 25mm because it's way cheaper than even one of those other lenses. One of the lenses that I did not cheap out on though is the 35mm f1.4. I shoot 35mm all the time, so I wanted to make sure I had the best possible one to get the best possible results. And here we are. This is the 35mm f1.4. Love this lens. It's insane. Moving up the range, we have the 50mm f1.4, and this is also a great relatively budget option if you're looking for a vintage 50. Moving up the range to 85mm, we have one of my favorite vintage lenses that I have. This is my baby, the 85mm f1.2 50th anniversary. This is a insanely rare lens. They only made, I think, 1,000 of them or 1,500. They're incredibly rare, and I love this thing with all my heart. It's crazy how heavy this thing is though. It's it's just a cannon of just glass and metal. Like, look at that. Look at that thing. But it's so sick. I want to shoot everything with this lens. Last but certainly not least, we have the most telephoto lens in this set, which is the Zeiss 100mm f2. This thing is awesome. I haven't gotten to use it too much because I'm waiting until I get this set modded out for video. There's a couple things that I have to fix on a few of these lenses, like the 18mm and the 35mm have stiff focus rings, so I need to take these things in and get them serviced, but that's kind of pricey, so I'm waiting on that, obviously. But as soon as I get these things serviced, I'm gonna start building this set probably through SimMod, and I am extremely excited to start using this for my professional work. So there we go. That is my collection of vintage lenses. If you want to see anything more in-depth on any specific lens or any specific lens set that I talked about in this video, please leave them down in the comments. I would love to start getting the ball rolling on making one of those videos. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down there as well. I love to read your guys' comments and respond to them. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It greatly helps this channel grow. And with all that being said, I will see you in the next one.